You're listening to the Faith Made Welcome podcast, a progressive podcast of faith where we look at Christianity from a progressive Baptist tradition. This podcast is brought to you by Commonwealth Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. So whoever you are, wherever you are, or whatever you think about faith, you're welcome here. Please let us know what you think about our podcast by subscribing to it or by sharing it with someone who may be looking for a podcast like this. And we would love to hear your feedback. So please leave us a comment or question on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Let's get started.
So here we go with episode 17 of Faith Made Welcome. This is our second week of Advent. So we're now launching into an episode about peace. And we have a whole new cast of characters for this week's episode. So starting one of our classic Faith Made Welcome participants, we have
Pastor Marty Anderson.
Indeed. And then we have a couple of more, I don't know if I want to call you classic.
Normal.
So we have Paul and I. I am a deacon, of course, at the church and a regular voice on this here podcast. And who are you, sir?
I am Paul, and I guess I am becoming a regular voice on this podcast. I think by that I mean I think I've been on all but like two,
Embrace
maybe.
It.
And it's wonderful to be here again with you, Cheri, and our guests.
Our guests. And who are our guests?
Hi, I'm Athena Burkett. I have been at the church now, I think 6 years, I was figuring out earlier, which feels a lot longer than it seems. I have been a deacon and am now on church council, and I sing pretty regularly in the live services. And outside of church, I'm a teacher. I've taught first, second, third, fifth, sixth, and now seventh grade.
Very cool.
So a lot of grades.
Athena does it all.
She does it all. Yeah, and I was thinking I have seen you on some streaming services lately, right? And it's wonderful to have you, Athena.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And
I'm Jenelle Rosecrance, and I am an unofficial member of the church. I love CBC.
Yeah, I was going to say Marty. You can,
Marty would like for me to be a member. But yeah, I attend CBC and love it, and thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
Jenelle, have you gone out to coffee with Lonnie?
I have, yes.
Oh, and you didn't seal the
almost a
deal?
member
Like,
now.
come on. Oh, yeah. It's all formalities from here. You're with us for life now. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you all for coming on for an episode about peace. I feel like I want to ask the first question similar to what I asked last week, which was, let's be honest, like 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
For me. Last episode, I asked folks what their first thought was when they were invited to be on a podcast about hope. And I kind of want to throw the same question out to y'all. When you knew this morning that you were going to be on a podcast about peace, what were your first thoughts about peace?
I'm laughing because Jenelle and I got coffee right before this, and we were talking about like, well, what are we going to say about peace? And I looked at her and I was just like, I don't know. Like, peace in these times is so hard. So I don't know that I have an answer to that. I'm going to figure that out as we talk, Cheri.
Perfect.
That's perfect. When you said you had coffee, I got a little nervous, like, oh no, they recorded the podcast. They just forgot to record it.
I hope they don't have an answer at this point. Right?
Yeah. Janelle, have you settled on a more of an answer yet? Or?
I have ideas about what peace is and what I want to share, but I also feel like my understanding of peace is limited to my own experience, and we all have different experiences with peace. But I was very humbled and excited to be asked. I was realizing that, so I set a word for each year to be my focus, and peace was my word for this year.
Oh, wow.
So humbled to get to talk about it more.
Yeah, this is perfect.
That's perfect. It's like we knew that, but we
I
didn't.
know.
Yeah.
I'm glad that she got that word that we sent her for this year.
Right. We sent her by way of the universe.
We set this up well,
yeah. So Marty, do you think you're the expert on peace then? Is that what you're going to bring to the table today?
Yeah, no. I'm not.
Okay.
like Janelle said, peace is different for everybody. And I think when we look at peace for Advent times, it's a more of a inward peace that we kind of focus on rather than a peace from wars and stuff like that. So we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, we definitely will. How about you, Paul? Are you a peace expert?
Oh, well, I mean, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me. Because I mean, as we were going around, I mean, the thought that I was having was, does one have to be an expert on these in order to speak to them? And I mean, obviously the answer is a resounding no, I think. But Marty, I mean, both you and Robin and anyone I think is in this position of, well, you know, Marty or Robin is talking about hope or they're talking about peace. They must be an expert. So what do you say, Marty, peace? And you're like, no, I'm no expert on this yet. So how do we, and this is me dodging the question, I think,
So good
how do we have a conversation about peace when all of us are like Jenelle so, you know, wisely said, it's like, I can just speak to my own experience, dude. As voices of authority, as voices that people go to when they want to talk about a thing. What is peace? I don't know. I mean, for me, it's like, how do I get through the day? How do I get through the day? How do I get through a day where I can sleep at night? Because ultimately, I think when my head hits the pillow at the end of the day, and as connected as you feel in your interactions with everyone, I think when I'm laying down in bed at night, it's like, here I am again. Another day behind, going to go to sleep and get up and do it again. If I'm going to sleep that night, I hope that I would have found some peace in something that would allow me to do so. And I don't know if that's living a life guided by moral compass or if that is in being of service to others and bringing joy to people as best I can, or bringing comfort whenever I see an opportunity to do so. I mean, I'm thinking maybe peace is the felt sense that I get when living by what is important to me. I don't know.
Well, that might be the starting place, though, is to try to figure out, like, well, we're not experts, but maybe we know what we think peace is.
Ultimately, dodging the question is usually the person who is asking all the other people about that.
I don't know what you're talking about, Paul.
So Cheri, what what would you say, Cheri? Peace.
See, I have peace all figured out, but I don't want to take it, spoil it for y'all. So I'm not gonna tell you.
Dodge.
No, no, of course. I ask the questions because I don't know the answers. That's how it goes. Yeah, so I'm gonna keep dodging and keep throwing questions out. No, I think peace is, I think I associate a lot of imagery with the word peace. Like, you see the word peace and you think of peace signs and you think of doves and you think of hippies and all of that. But for me, I think it's hard to know where peace really lives, especially in a year like this one. So I don't know. I think peace is something I struggle with, and it's something I'm always seeking, maybe. But what is peace?
I've been thinking about what Marty said about how, like, in Advent, peace is more about internal.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that really resonates, especially in a pandemic, because there's so much going on that is out of our control. Like, really the only piece that we can control right now is what's inside.
Yeah.
And, as someone who struggles with anxiety and depression and just like all of these mental battles that you're fighting in your head constantly, for me, peace is when that kind of goes quiet and I can just be present in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten really into, not really meditation, but more just like, deep breathing and mantras, and just trying to understand that I can't control what other people are feeling. I can't control how other people are reacting, but I can control those things for myself. And so there's no point in worrying about that or trying to fix it. Instead, I'm going to focus on breathing and focus on just finding that peace with where I'm at. And that I've been working on that for years, but I feel like in the past, especially like a month or so, just with especially all of the crazy stuff that we had going on the past couple weeks, right? Like I have to focus inward if I'm going to find any source of peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Focusing inward. I mean, I think that that's a big part of it for me too, because I think anxiety and depression to me are the antithesis of peace, right? So those are the things I'm trying to push out of my life so I can find some peace. So meditation, I think, is maybe a thing that we can think about as something we do to cultivate a sense of peace. Are there other peace practices that we have in our lives? What brings us peace?
I would say, going off of that, once we can have a sense of understanding of what's going on inside of us, then we can practice peace in other spaces of our lives. So, for example, I feel like we can experience peace in our relationships, and we can pursue that by knowing what we need in the relationship or what our hopes are for the relationship. So when we get quiet, we can be aware of what's going on inside of us. And then I think a practice of peace might be like reconciliation or forgiveness. So maybe we're aware that we are hurt by somebody or that we hurt them. I think one way to practice peace is by seeking to reconcile that, but it comes from being aware of what's going on inside of you and knowing what will help you move forward.
How do you uncover that awareness, Jenelle?
So meditation would be one way, even if it's just 5 minutes of quietness to listen to what's going on in my head. And I think that's usually what it is removing distractions to create space to hear myself. A lot of times it's taking a walk outside, especially a long walk where I can just get lost in the moment and I'm not trying to get anywhere or do anything. Or exercise can be helpful, or yoga. A lot of times it helps me to move my body in order to know what's going on emotionally.
Yeah. Marty, you're kind of similar, right? Like, I think I remember talking to you about like meditation, like sitting on a cushion doesn't seem to be too much of your jam. Is that right?
No. And for me to retreat inward, I need to do something, whether it is a walk or exercise or just some kind of movement. I mostly, when I go for a run, I get a lot of thinking done. And I don't listen to music. I don't have, earphones in.
Yeah.
I'm just me listening to my body, my thoughts. And, that gives you a sense of peace, but it also just gives you a sense of just being present. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't know if that's where I achieve peace, but it is where I kind of center myself. I think Robin said it a couple episodes back, where she said peace is in the Bible in Hebrew, it's shalom. And that word has the kind of the concept of wholeness and the peace of being whole. And it's not the absence of chaos. It's the togetherness of your life of wholeness. Can you have peace in the chaos? Can you find that peace in the chaos? And I think that's what, we see from the stories of scripture too, that the peace is, there's always chaos around it.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it requires no lack of chaos, nobody is going to find peace. I mean, that can't be a prerequisite.
And what I've always kind of like, the Advent story is so strange because, the angels come to these shepherds, right? And say, you need to go to Bethlehem and, because Jesus is being born. And so they do. And then the angels just start having a party and they start screaming, glory to God in the highest, peace on earth. Like, I want to know what that moment was like. Angels are saying, there's now peace on earth. And the shepherds are probably looking around, what is this angel talking about? Peace. But they were screaming at that moment, there was peace on earth. And I just kind of wanted to know what that moment was.
Yeah.
Like, what was going on?
Yeah.
Like,
what were they seeing?
what did it feel
Yeah.
like? You know, like these angels just saying, hey, now there's peace on earth.
It's interesting because the way you describe that, Marty, doesn't necessarily jive with how we often think about peace. Like, you literally said, like, the angels were having a party and then they were screaming. And that's, like, not how we were thinking about peace before, right? Like,
those
we were
aren't
thinking
PC
about
words.
this very quiet, like, so this idea that peace can be something on earth in a moment of chaos, and that the chaos doesn't have to go away for the peace to be present.
It makes me think about like how it's all about your internal mindset and almost like the lens with which you're viewing what's happening, right? Mm-hmm. So like I can be sitting in a really tense meeting, but if in my own mind I'm thinking, you know what, like the world's not ending, right? Like this, we're gonna get through this hard part. Like I'm gonna listen to what they're saying, kind of what you were talking about, Jenelle, with relationships. Is like I'm gonna listen and I'm gonna hear and I'm gonna try and understand, and like I don't have to be combatant in this. I don't have to feed into this negativity. I can have peace in a meeting where everyone's screaming at each other. You know, like it's all about how you are approaching the situation that makes it peaceful.
Not necessarily about what the specifics are about what's going on and the things that are happening and the chaos around us, but more of our relationship kind of with it can be a peaceful one, you know. So the peace isn't actually in the things necessarily so much as it is how we fit into those things and our intentions going into it. Maybe, you know, can you make your own peace? What does it mean to make peace with something? Because that's what it is. It's like there's this phrase, making peace with something. What does that look like for you, Jenelle? I mean, have you had do you see a time in your life or a circumstance or a situation where you said, I can't be with this way. I have to make peace with this. And what does that look like? And I'm assuming the answer is not no. You've lived on this earth long enough to something must have happened where it's like, I got to find peace in this. I need to make peace with this in one way or another.
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of opportunities, and the opportunities that I can think of right now are mostly with a family member, with my dad, of seeking peace. And I think there are several different components of that, but I do think it absolutely starts with myself. So being aware of how I feel, acknowledging that, accepting that, listening to that, because my default is to deny my feelings and the chaos inside. So it's being honest about that, and then to do what I think will help create peace within, and it won't necessarily resolve the situation. It won't necessarily bring peace for the other person, because I think it's true that we can only control and make peace for ourselves. But I also believe that when we make peace for ourselves, it can inspire other people to create peace within themselves as well. And so for me, that looked like having some hard conversations with my dad and being vulnerable about areas where I was hurt and how I perceived situations, and giving him the space to talk to me. But ultimately, my peace didn't come from his response. It came from knowing that I was doing what I needed to do to respect my journey and my process. And of course, his response was meaningful and important, and it impacted me and my emotions. But I think ultimately the peace came from knowing that I was responding to what was going on within and seeking alignment with what was going on within. So Paul, you had said in the beginning that peace, maybe it's a felt sense that you get from living according to, you know, your values or what you believe. And I resonate with that. I think it comes from acting on our convictions or our desires or hopes for our lives and ourselves and those around us, and pursuing that rather than giving up or trying to control a situation.
Thank you, Jenelle. That's beautiful. What was the hardest part of that conversation with your dad? Now in hindsight, it's like, what was the hardest part of it?
It was having the conversation. It was being vulnerable and exposing what was going on inside of me to my dad. Because I had the opportunity to be rejected at that point or to be hurt. And so it was the possibility that I would be disappointed or rejected. And I think in terms of making peace with other people, that's always the hardest part for me. Vulnerability and revealing parts of myself to somebody else.
It's really interesting because, like, listening to you talk about this and just thinking about my own relationship with peace, I'm thinking, like, peace really takes courage, actually.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Right? Like, we just had a conversation about hope on the last episode and talked about the fact that hope is related to courage, but I think peace is a really courageous thing to seek, right?
Well, it takes more courage to seek peace than it does to seek like violence or war or something like that. I mean, you can just get mad and go start conflict. That's not hard for us.
Yeah.
It's hard for us.
The default setting, maybe, in fact.
Take a look around, right? You can see plenty of...
What's hard for us is to have the courage to be peacemakers.
Yeah. I'm curious, Athena, like earlier when you were talking about being in that meeting and being able to know that you can be in a place of peace, even if the people in the meeting are yelling, what do you think you have to do to get to that place where you can do that? Like, how do you prepare yourself for that kind of courageous moment?
I think it takes one, knowing that you're going to be in that situation. That definitely helps. But more so, it takes being okay with knowing who you are and that being enough. Right. So like the situation that I'm facing pretty consistently these days is being a teacher in a pandemic when no one knows what's happening. And, you know, some parents want us to go back to in-person teaching, and teachers are scared about doing that. And teachers don't think it's fair. But then knowing that some parents are really struggling, like they either can't work from home and so their kids are left at home, or they have to work to continue to feed their family. Like I get, when I can get my kids to turn on their microphones, for some of them, what I hear in the background is just chaos. Like there are like 3 kids learning in one room, or their internet's going in and out. So like there are real reasons why people need to come back. And so as a teacher on my team, there's a lot of negativity about us coming back. And it's just pretty constant, like complaining that like this isn't fair and not seeing the other side to why it might be needed. And so that was really hard for me to be a part of, because as an Enneagram 2, I see both sides to everything. I have a lot of trouble making decisions, but I can understand and I can empathize with what it's like to be at home in that bad situation, or a situation that's not optimal for learning. And so it was just really weighing me down, because I not only didn't like the negativity, but I wanted to make them feel happy. Like I wanted to point out, well, these are the good things, or like it might be good for this. But I really just had to let that go and own that I'm not in control of their feelings. It's not my job to make them feel happy. It's my job to make sure my students have what they need. And once I was able to stop trying to fix everything, then I could sit in there and just be okay with like, I know that I'm not in control of what's going to happen, so I'm going to make the best of what I can. Like this is a sucky situation for everybody, for parents, for teachers, for staff, for literally everyone in the world hates their life right now because of the pandemic. And so I'm going to make the best of what I can, because I don't want to live in that chaos. I want to choose to live in the peace that I can make for myself and try and move forward that way. But it took me a while to get there. It took being very conscious about had to make a choice to be in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I make that choice every day when I enter those meetings.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think in a lot of ways, for myself, the more I try to cling to something, the less likely I am to experience peace. So clinging to expectations for how something should go, or clinging to my sense of how I want to feel within something, like the more I cling to like some external sense of what ought to be, the more difficult it is to find peace. So when you're saying like I have to let go, like it's interesting that a big part of finding peace is letting go.
Mm-hmm.
Which maybe even like in biblical times, right? Like this is the savior we got, like some dude in a manger.
Yeah.
This is not what we expected. Maybe peace is letting go and saying, yeah, well, that's the one we got.
Yeah. I always had a hard time with the phrase finding peace, just because I understand what people are trying to say, but I also know that for me, I never can achieve peace. I always need a story bigger than myself. That's why I grab onto this Advent story, or the story of our faith, right? And me knowing that as a Christian, peace is within me. It'll never leave me. Connecting with that peace, that's my challenge, right? Trying to center myself, or, make myself whole. Shalom, however you want to say it. So I know that we say we got to find the peace.
Find it, yeah.
But we know where it is. Problem is how are we going to use it? What are we going to do with it? And if we go back to like our shepherd story, like the angel's like, there's peace on earth. And the shepherd's looking like, okay, this angel just told us to quit our jobs and go to another town just to see a baby. Right?
Sounds right. Yeah, sounds right.
Better be a cute baby.
But they did it, right? And then they left praising God for it. So the peace is always close, is what I guess I'm getting at. You might have to know where to go to get it, but the peace is always with you.
Yeah, well, Marty, you used a phrase a little earlier, a peacemaker, being a peacemaker. Do you see yourself in that role of peacemaker within a congregation or within your life? And what does it mean to be a peacemaker?
Peacemaker. I think when Jesus was talking about it, he said in the Beatitudes, he said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will inherit the earth. He wasn't saying that for somebody to strive to be a peacemaker. He was actually telling people that were peacemakers, you are doing a great job. And I think what peacemakers were being is just doing the next right thing for yourself, and then being a channel for that for others. I think Jenelle talked a little bit about that earlier, about what can I do to be peace, and how can that inspire others to be peacemakers. And it takes a lot of, you got to be okay with however other people take your sense of peace that you're giving away. But being a peacemaker is, I just think, it's just trying to do the next right thing. Not always for myself, but for community, friends, for loved ones. It's that shalom. It's that wholeness.
Jenelle, did you feel like a peacemaker when you were talking to your dad?
I don't know if I felt that way, no.
or was it just terror? Right?
Yeah, I was just terrified.
But you were. I heard your story and I said, oh, you're a peacemaker. And I don't say that to dismiss your feelings. I just said that because where I hear the story, you took the courage, like we talked about. You made the stand to take the courage to be peace.
And I think this reveals an important thing about peacemaking is that a lot of times you don't feel like a peacemaker because you're doing something different than maybe the status quo or the norm. Like if you go and have a conversation with your dad and you don't normally have vulnerable conversations, you're doing something that could cause a response or conflict. And so it oftentimes feels like you're disturbing the peace or the status quo if you are seeking peace outside of yourself and involving others in that process. Or it could be a bigger issue, beyond an interpersonal relationship. And oftentimes it, like I said, it feels like you are creating an opportunity for conflict, actually, when you are seeking peace.
Yeah, right.
Well, and that brings up the idea of like, what's the difference in being comfortable with my situation and having peace about my situation?
Yeah.
You know?
It can't just be blind complicity.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this has me thinking about like the space between peace and people pleasing. Like people pleasing is not a peace practice. Because right? Because
it is not.
It is not. It is not.
No, it is not.
It is not. And if
sorry, Cheri.
No, it's okay.
I just had to let that go through me there.
Yeah,
for a minute.
yeah.
Like, oh boy, yeah, that right.
Yeah, I think I've spent a lot of my life thinking that people pleasing was what I did to be a peacemaker. And then I think all that did was make for a very exhausted pigeon version of Cheri.
Yeah. With
no internal peace. And the fact of the matter is I can never bring peace to people outside of myself. I just can't do it. And so I'm starting to learn that the word no is sometimes a peace practice that I have to observe.
Jenelle is nodding over there.
Our listeners can almost hear her nodding. Yeah.
I completely resonate. And I'm also an Enneagram 2, like Athena. And I think Enneagram 2s have a tendency towards people pleasing because we want to help people and make them happy. And sometimes it seems like saying yes is what we can do to create the most peace. I think what I've learned is that when we create like a fake sense of peace, it actually creates a lot more chaos. And if we are wanting to say no, but we're saying yes, it creates confusion for the people around us. And I've had to do a lot of work to say no when that's how I feel internally, to vocalize what's going on internally. And a lot of times that is through a no.
I think it also relates when we're thinking about disrupting the narratives that are not seeking peace, right? If we think about anyone who's pursuing inequality or who is discriminating, right? Like if it may seem like the more peaceful approach to just let it slide because we're not going to create confrontation. But if we actually want to work for peace, we have to be willing to speak up and disrupt that. And I think the peace comes after that moment when you're at peace with yourself because you know that you did the right thing to help others, as opposed to just making yourself feel good because you didn't have to make someone mad.
Yeah, in that there's a Mother Teresa quote, like, we don't have peace because we forgot that we belong to each other. And I think she's right.
So how do we remind ourselves that we belong to each other? Anyone can answer that. It was a serious question. So
we thought Cheri was going to answer.
It's like, that's how you shut up a room right there. It's like, so how do you?
No, I think it's going back to connecting to our faith.
Yeah.
I mean, our faith has connected us all on this podcast. It's a story that's bigger than ourselves, about a God who loves us too much to let us go. And, when God decided to come be here on earth, the angels did celebrate. And the angels knew, hey, there was peace on earth. And everybody came to see Jesus in the midst of total chaos, in the midst of a king trying to kill all the babies. It's just a story of God connecting us and reminding us that we are connected to each other, and that within us there's this peace that we belong to God, belong to each other.
I think it's also about continuing to intentionally seek out relationships with people, especially in COVID times. That's really hard, but like the more that we separate ourselves from other people physically, mentally, however you may separate yourself, the less you remember that you belong to each other. And so even for those introverts like myself who like love just sitting at home and not talking to anybody, like I continually push myself to talk to people on FaceTime or go for a walk or do something, because building relationships with people and sustaining relationships with people is how we keep the bridges built. It's how we continue to build each other up. And hopefully as a community, then we're seeking peace for other communities and we just keep making those connections. But if we stop connecting with people, that's when we lose peace.
So part of being a peacemaker is reminding people that they are connected to you and to each other in meaningful ways.
Well, don't you think that's part of why people lost such a sense of peace during the pandemic? Like,
because that was the first thing to go, right? Was physical connection to each other.
Yeah. And so in some ways, this whole thing, I mean, that's why you don't get inner peace by being like Thoreau out at Walden Pond. We need each other.
I don't know. It seems pretty good.
Yeah.
Well,
sometimes, but not always. Yeah.
And I think peace gets lost when life gets interrupted. And that's the whole Advent story. Like life is interrupted always. With Mary, with Joseph, everybody in that story, life was interrupted. But it was interrupted in an amazing way. And the angels had to remind us that there was peace on earth.
Athena, do you have a story about peacemaking experience that you've had? We put Jenelle I shouldn't say raked over the coals or something like that, right?
Do you put her in the hot seat is a more gentle way to say.
Is there a hot seat for Athena in this?
I mean, of course, I have lots of stories.
Yeah, names removed, right?
Appropriate for our podcast. It's a different story.
All stories are welcome here.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, I the first thing that popped into mind was during my 5th year of teaching, which for those of you who are not, well, I guess none of Cheri, you're an educator, but for those of you who are not educators, there's this kind of stigma associated with teaching where no one makes it past 5 years, at least in public.
Yeah, right.
Like you're considered advanced if you make it past 3 years, and then everyone burns out at 5. So I was set and determined that I was not going to be one of those teachers. And then my 5th year came and it like everything broke down, because teaching is just such a stressful job and in many ways thankless, and you get yelled at by parents and students, and like it's just, teachers have it really rough, y'all. And Amen. So my 5th year came and I was thinking like, okay, I'm having a horrible year. I'm losing touch with who I am. I don't like the person that I've become. I can't control these things that are happening to me. Like I have to do something different. But at the same time, I felt so guilty that I was going to be another teacher who left after 5 years. Right. And the kids were going to have another teacher that they wouldn't get to see in the building. Right. Especially because I joined specifically to become a teacher who didn't do that. Like it was a horrible place to be in. But at the same time, it was like my life is in shambles and something has to change. And so it sounds weird to say, but I feel like it took a lot of courage for me to leave the classroom. And I'm not saying that to be egotistical or anything, but um, sometimes you have to put yourself first, and in order to be able to help others. There's this quote that I love, that's like, you're not expected to set yourself on fire in order to keep everybody else warm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really resonated with me at that time in my life. So I transitioned and became an instructional coach, but it still took me many months to stop feeling guilty about leaving the classroom. And how I eventually made peace with that, I guess, is because I was able to start seeing how what I was doing from a coaching role was helping support the teachers who were then helping the students. And so I was able to find that connection back to how what I was doing was still making a difference. But it took a lot of reflection, and honestly, it took a lot of other people pointing that out for me. Like, I don't think I would have gotten there without a support network saying, like, no, like, you're still doing okay, like, you're still making a difference, you're not being selfish. And so then that brings me back to the connection point of like, it's really hard to find peace, or even internal personal peace, if you don't have other people who you're connected to, who can support you and who can remind you of that you're loved. And again, speaking as a 2 who's constantly seeking, am I worthy of love? I have to have those connections. And that's another reason that I have been so intentional during the pandemic about creating groups and meetings where I am forced to interact with people on a regular basis, because I know that I will spiral down very quickly if I don't have people constantly like feeding into me or being able to feed into other people.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, so I mean, you were able to. I mean, you talked about courage within that. I mean, what you had to pull from in order to make that decision, and it felt like courage to you.
Yeah.
To do, yeah. So, something came up in the podcast last week, and by that I mean an hour and a half ago, when we recorded that, about because Robin used the word selfish as well, right? In this notion of selfishness. And I think what came out of that was, it's okay to do things for yourself, and peacemaking in having the difficult conversations and doing the hard things that require courage to do, can be ultimately done as an act of self-care, as they do represent your peacemaking with yourself and the world in which you relate. Does that make sense, Cheri?
I think
kind
so.
of.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking about how, in some ways, all of these Advent concepts are things that that you can run out of, right? Like, you can run out of hope, run out of peace, run out of joy, and run out of love. And so I think with all of them, you both need to take care of yourself. You need like this self-focused practice, but then you also need community, and you need both. I think it was, maybe a week ago, that I was talking to Paul about the fact that my tank was empty. My tank was just super depleted, and I had nothing left to give to anyone else. And Paul asked me why I only had one tank. Because apparently you need a tank for yourself, and then the tank that you use to support others. And I've just had one, y'all.
Well, the lesson here is you don't need to, but there are consequences if you do, right?
There are consequences.
You end up giving yourself away.
Yeah.
You end up giving yourself away.
Yeah, and so like I was just like waking up each day and thinking like I have to be in service of others, and being surprised that I was completely depleted. And so now I'm like, part of my own trying to come to a place of peace for myself is trying to figure out, okay, thinking about these two things as separate, like I'm going to seek this kind of internal peace, and take care of myself, and I'm going to be in community, and it's a both and. But I can't just keep giving until I'm an exhausted pigeon.
I'm thinking about like, so how I said similar to what you just said, which is like, if you keep giving of yourself, you're going to run out of stuff, and then you can't serve others. And so I think I justify taking time for myself. Say, well, if I take care of myself first, then I'm going to be able to serve others better or more. But I'm wondering, like, should I reframe that, like, so that I take care of myself? Period. Stop. Like, end of sentence. That's okay, and that's enough. Like, that concept for me is really hard for me to wrap my mind around right now.
If the act of just taking care of Athena produces peace and the relationships with everything around you, it's like, what would happen if Athena just took care of Athena? And it's like this blissful awareness just like settled over her and all her needs were met. And I mean, there may or may not be bunny rabbits and butterflies and things like that, but there could be, you know, what if a little bit of self-care is an expression of peace, if entire self-care is the ultimate expression of peace.
And not like at the expense of caring for others, right? Yeah. But doing that, like you said, Cheri, just because there is that other tank.
Yes.
And like, I'm not filling up this tank so that it will overflow and fill up the other tank next. I'm just filling up that tank so that tank is full.
Yeah. I found myself saying to a student of mine this week, she was talking about how she gives herself tough love. And then later in the conversation, she was describing this very kind thing she does for her boyfriend. And I pointed out to her, like, don't you deserve at least as much love as your boyfriend does? And then I started realizing that advice is really for me. Cheri, you deserve at least as much love as you give your students. I think part of it is just realizing that, like, if everyone is worthy of love, that means you too.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So trying to wrestle with that is a big piece of how I am trying to come to peace.
Yeah. See what you did there.
Yeah. So Marty, what are you thinking when you light that second candle?
He doesn't light the candles.
Who lights the candles over there? Athena, is that going to be you? Who?
We'll have different people light the candles for Advent.
Cool.
You know, when we light the peace candle, it'll just make the room even more brighter. We'll have the hope candle lit. We'll have the peace candle lit, and it will make the room a lot brighter, more encouraging. And I don't know. I'm a person that kind of runs on one tank, but I feel like it's a big tank. And I don't know. That's why I cling to my faith, because clinging to my faith takes so much pressure off of me, that I don't have to work so hard to be good. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't have to work I can rest easy. Mm-hmm. I can just rest easy. And in that moment, seeing those candles lit, it's just another reminder that I'm already God's and I can just rest easy. That's probably what I'll be thinking.
Cool. Jenelle, peace was your word for the year. What did that feel like at the time? How was this? So was this like a scratch off lottery ticket? It's like you scratch the thing off that says peace on it, or how did this peace word come into your year? So this is like what, December, January?
Yeah, I think January. But it came from recognizing how often I denied my own peace, and how that was a deeply rooted habit of mine that I had developed through my whole life, and how I needed to be intentional to make a shift. It wasn't just going to happen for me to live with more peace. And so that's why I made it my word. I knew that I would need to be intentional. And it really did come from other people helping me see how much I overlooked my peace and how much I prioritized the peace of others at the expense of myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the pandemic didn't derail that. I mean, pandemic hits and it's like, well, so much for peace. You stuck to it.
Mm-hmm.
You stuck to it.
I think it made it clear how much I needed peace and how relevant it was. I think in harder times we can see how beneficial it is to live with a practice of peace in everything we do, because there is so much more chaos out there that we can't control. We realize our lack of control, and so the only thing we can control is what's within and how we live our lives. So I feel like there's an even greater need when you see that.
Yeah, you refer to peace as a practice.
I feel like it's a lifestyle, but I also agree that peace is within us. And I was thinking, I don't feel like my peace is ever complete just on my own. So we talked about people and God. I feel like it's 3 parts for me: connection with people, connection with God, and connection with self. And so I think it's a practice of being connected to those 3 things.
And you have a practice for each? You have a practice for each?
I feel like it's not one practice, but it's more of a commitment, and then the practice looks different every day and in the different situations.
Yeah.
And I think thinking of it as a practice gets us away from that word that Marty didn't like earlier, the idea of finding peace. Like, let's practice peace instead of going and finding it. Yeah.
Because if you're looking for it, you're looking for it somewhere outside of yourself, and if you find it, it's an accident and you stumbled across it inadvertently, you tripped over it, right? Maybe not recognizing it at the time, but making your own, that feels like something you can do. Feels like something you can do as part of a practice. Wow. I mean, we've turned it into a verb, like a lifestyle almost, like as Jenelle said. That's pretty cool. Yeah. It's like we can wake up in the morning and say, what can I do to find peace today? What can I do to be peaceful today? What can I do to practice being peaceful today, or practice peace?
To make peace.
Make peace.
To be a peacemaker.
Yeah. Or to witness peace within us.
This requires some awareness. We started with this a little bit, awareness of what's moving through us at the time a little bit, and being open to feeling or seeing or recognizing when there's not peace. And that can be its own set of courageous admission, I think. As I used to say back a month or 2 ago, this has gone on long enough, right? There's peace to be found here, but it's not going to happen by itself, because after 48 years, it has not made itself peace. Maybe I need to do something about it. Maybe I need to do something about it. So when does something you get to the point where you put your foot down and you say, okay, it's time to do something about this?
I guess one question I have too that maybe we can think about a little as we wrap up today. How can we cultivate peace as a church together? Especially during these times.
Yeah. It's telling stories like we did today. Small groups. I don't know. It's knowing the people in your life and knowing what you need and knowing what they need. And that makes it challenging in these times, but I know soon that we'll all be back together, but the work of peace will still be just as needed, even when we're back together.
Yeah, I think it's about keeping those connections alive. Like, you don't have to go to a small group or a pastor check-in or young adult group in order to connect with people.
But you should.
But I was going to say, but you can do those things, right?
You could do those things. But I mean, we all have different relationships with different people in the church, and reach out to them, reach out to each other, check in on each other, even if it's just to say, hey, and catch up. Like, they don't have to have something big or catastrophic happen in their life for you to reach out. People value connecting with each other and building relationships, and we all have the power to do that within, whether it's just with one person or whether it's 5 or sure, you can do whatever brings you peace, bring peace to others through your work.
Yeah, and that's where the episode we recorded before this one kind of went at the end as well. The question was actually asked, what would you say to someone who's losing hope? And the answers that were given were similar, Athena, to what you just said. Reach out, to someone, call a hotline or somebody in the church, and reestablish that connection. And not just hope can be found there, peace can be found there as well.
And I would say if you're looking to be a peacemaker, there are probably people who are losing hope, who are not, like, they can't reach out, or they don't know how, or they're scared to. So by being a peacemaker, if you're reaching out first, you're making that bridge happen so that then they can ask for help that they need. So
and that can be
one, you're helping the other.
Yeah, and that can be part of your own self-care. That can be part of your own self-process. Yeah. It can be part of your own practice of, who did I reach out to today or this week or recently, who's somebody I know who might not be being reached out to. And if the response is, you're the 5th person to reach out to me this week, what the hell's going on? It's like, that can be okay. That can be okay. Right. But, or they might say, wow, it really means a lot that you did. Thank you so much for doing that. And both can be true. Both can be true.
It's so interesting to me that now both of these episodes in Advent have circled back to the importance of community. Because I usually think of Advent as such a personal, siloed, it's me and my devotional kind of time. And I don't know if it's COVID or what, but it definitely does feel like this Advent season I'm getting like billboard sign reminders that, yeah, like Marty said earlier, a la Mother Teresa, we belong to each other.
Cool. Well, Jenelle, any last words? What do you say to your listeners out here about peace?
Well, I think, going to what Cheri said, I do think an essential part of peace is knowing that you're not alone. And that comes from community and from God. So it's not just an internal thing. It also, it has to be an internal thing, but it also comes from people and from God. And I do think that we can be a part in helping each other see that we're not alone in this.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Athena, thoughts?
I would say if you are looking for peace, come to one of our groups, including the young adult group that meets on Thursdays at 7, every other Thursday. We would love to have you. If you are a young adult at heart, we welcome you.
I was going to say, how young do you have to be to go to the young adult group? Because I think I aged out.
All are welcome. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marty, peace. What do you think?
I think it's necessary for us to have a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And that just inspires us to have relationships with others too. And we're getting ready to celebrate that gift of God being with us. And that's as peaceful as you can get right there.
Yeah. Cheri, what do you say, huh?
I knew you were going to turn that head around to me, Paul.
I'm asking the question, so I don't actually have to answer this one.
I don't think it's that easy, sir. I don't know. I really think that, I don't know. What's the question again? I'm missing it.
Last thoughts on peace.
Okay. Clearly.
Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I don't know. I think community really does bring me peace. I think when I don't have peace, I think I can lean on the peace of others sometimes. And so I think that's like kind of my takeaway. Like I often, I waver in my faith. I waver in a sense of peace. But I can find people who are anchors in this community. I think Marty's like peace and his sense of faith and the confidence he has, for example, that like God is with us, God is in us. When I waver, I always know Marty's got it. So I think peace comes from knowing even when you don't
pressure,
have it.
Cheri, too much pressure.
You always have to have it, Marty. No, that's why there are co-pastors. When you don't have it, Robin's hopefully got it. Someone in us has it. So I like having, I like knowing someone's going to be pulling through. Mm-hmm. What about you, Paul?
What's the question?
Final thoughts on peace with Paul Fitzgerald.
I don't know. I mean, this is nice. I mean, I'm feeling it right now, just being able to hang out with some awesome folks and have an honest conversation about it that, some people might listen to and enjoy. Just that sense of feeling like, I'm doing some sort of good work that could be done, in ways that folks could use it, and I find peace in that, and I don't know if I have much else to say about it besides, it's a felt sense for me. It's like I mean that I associate it with that feeling of peace, peaceful, it's peace. Looking at the ocean, going to the desert, recording a podcast. Peace. Uh-huh. Awesome. Cool. Well, we can find Athena oftentimes singing in church, right, on the internet. Mm-hmm. Right, we can see her
every Sunday.
Yeah, and Marty, we see plenty of Marty as well, and we listen to Marty a lot. And so, thank you again, Marty, for that. Jenelle, it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, thank you for joining us on this. Cheri, a pleasure as always.
As always, Paul.
What's next week, Joy?
Next week is the pink candle, Paul.
Finally!
Paul likes the pink
candle. What's up with that pink candle? That's the question I brought in many of these.
We're going to get some joy next week.
Were they out of purple ones? So we had to get a pink one, or what? Is that from the B? Is that from the B rack of the candle aisle, or what? What's going on? Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thanks.
Everyone, we'll say let's say peace to everybody on 3. 1, 2, 3. Peace.
Peace.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.
All right.
This podcast is produced by Cheri Spiegel, Paul Fitzgerald, and This Most Unbelievable Life. For more information, please check us out at www.thismostunbelievablelife.com.